continuing with our questions. Can the character of an individual be read in their hands? Frankly, I don't know. I don't know anything about those things. I don't know anything about horoscopes. Inasmuch as all of these things are effects, I wouldn't want to put power in them, even if it humanly were true. Now, there may be some truth to all of this horoscope business and fortune-telling from a human standpoint, the same as there is some truth to catching cold sitting in a draft from a human standpoint. But from our standpoint, if God is the only cause, we certainly cannot make stars or planets causes or lines in the hand. And so even if it turned out that these things were humanly true, they still would be set aside by us. Even if they were law, divine grace would set them aside. And so I would handle it in that way. How would one handle the pressure of business activity? Well, that comes under the same heading of handling the activity of human existence. It has to be handled, first of all, through the ability to meditate, to find one's inner peace, to get into the rhythm of living, the rhythm of God living, not human living. Again comes that word transition. As we meditate, as we make our contact with the Spirit within, we find ourselves moving into a rhythm, into a movement, into a spiritual movement that carries us. The Paul's statement is, I live, yet not I, Christ liveth my life. Now, as you get that feeling of a presence, of something flowing in and through you, it carries all of the responsibility. It carries all of the weight. It does the work. And that relieves the pressure. You get to becoming a beholder, a witness, standing aside, a little bit apart from your life and watching it unfold. For instance, a businessman goes to his office and has mail. But if he sits right down in the chair and starts to open that mail and to be concerned with what's in it, he very quickly comes under the pressure of business. However, if that man has, either before leaving home or after getting to his office, taken a few minutes to get into his inner being and found a center of peace there, then when he opens the mail, it's as if there was something back here looking at it and giving him the answers to whatever it is he finds in that mail. Now, in the same way, it all has to do with how one's approach is to the business. From a spiritual standpoint, it would be one that would relieve all pressures. And again, I'll illustrate. Supposing one were a salesman. Of course, the problem is there, first of all, selling merchandise, and secondly, getting it delivered. In selling the merchandise, there's the problem of buyers. The salesman, if he's a human being, is competing with every other salesman in his line. He's competing in the sale of merchandise. He's competing for the buyer's favor. He's competing all up and down the line, and in the last analysis, he has to compete with other salesmen in his own factory to get deliveries. Now, the moment that salesman lifts himself above the human picture, he finds that God is the only buyer. There's no such thing as 1,000 buyers, no such thing as human buyers. There is only one buyer, and that is God. And it is to God that he offers his merchandise. Why? God created the idea of that merchandise to begin with. Everything that exists is an activity of God, a creation of God. And so whether we are selling mechanical gadgets or clothing, it all originated in consciousness. God is the originator, the creator, the designer. Well, I'm sure God never created any article to hang idle on someone's shelf. And so the very realization that God is the creator means that God has created the outlet for it, the buyer for it, the display of it, and the customer for it. The whole of that picture is an activity going on in the consciousness of God, not in the consciousness of man. Well, you might bring that down as a concrete example to us here. The idea of this truth is an unfoldment of God to me. Wouldn't do much good, though, if there weren't someone here listening to it. Therefore, it must also have been the activity of God that brought you here. And so, this entire activity of truth is an activity of God consciousness. It operated in my consciousness to bring me here on this end, operated in your consciousness to bring you here on that end. Now then, the hotel also enters into this picture, because they have to be paid for all of these rooms and all of this service. And that too becomes an activity of God, because this whole hotel and all hotels began as an activity of God in some individual consciousness. And so it must be the responsibility of that same mind of God to see that the hotel gets paid. Now, don't you see that if I were to think of this activity of truth from my statement, from my standpoint, and forget that it's the activity of truth in your consciousness, this part of the picture wouldn't be complete. If, however, I were to forget that the activity of the railroads and the airplanes and the hotels was also an activity of God, they might be left out of the picture. But in my business, God, the divine consciousness, is the originator of this entire idea. Being the originator of it, it is the activity of this idea. The activity and the substance and the cause and the effect and the entire responsibility is on its shoulder. Well, it's in the same way, supposing we paint a picture. Where did the idea of the picture come from? Where did the ability to make the picture, draw or paint the picture come from? All from God. And for what purpose? To hang idle on a wall? Oh, no. The activity of God that conceived the whole idea must complete the idea. And so at the very time that the idea of painting the picture was born, at that very idea, the ultimate wall for it to hang on was created, and everything necessary in between. It is the activity of God in my consciousness that makes us understand each other. It is the activity of God in your consciousness that makes us understand each other. It is the activity of God in our consciousness that fulfills the entire picture from my starting out and arriving here safely by air to my return home safely by air. And the same activity of truth must be operating in your consciousness to bring you here safely and return you safely, and to see that everybody up and down along the line receives everything that they are entitled to, whether of truth or of money. What difference does it make what the form of good is? God is the activity of it. Now, the moment we understand God, now you'll find a great deal of this in the pamphlet, Business and Salesmanship and Truth for Business and Professional People, for the simple reason that my own background is business. And I had the opportunity of living with this in the business world before I left the business world for this activity. And I know whereof I speak, God is the activity of business. Now, the moment we understand that, the pressure is lifted because we have this invisible something that comes along and does this. I call this the infinite invisible. In Don Blanding's new book, he calls it the silent partner. But it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. It is a presence. The Hebrews called it Emmanuel. Paul called it the Christ. Jesus called it the Father within. He doeth the work. Well, if God, the Father within, doeth the work, how can you have a pressure in your business? You are taking over God's responsibility. The pressure is upon his shoulder, it says. The government is upon his shoulder. But if you are not acknowledging that, if you are not relying on that, then you are taking over a responsibility which doesn't belong to that. Now, suppose for a moment that you were to accept yourself as a beholder in your business, and you were to sit here and watch the activity of this infinite, invisible unfold. You would find it unfold as a right idea. You would find it unfold as capital, if your business needed capital. You would find it unfold as employees, as salespeople, as buyers, as workers. You would find it unfold as customers, and finally as payment in your bank. In other words, the activity would be a complete one. The nature of God is fulfillment. Remember that. The nature of God is fulfillment. God does not create a telephone system and no one to use it. God does not create automobiles and no fuel to make them run. God does not create or become responsible for any activity in our consciousness without fulfilling it. God is fulfillment. The nature of God is fulfillment. And if you need any scriptural proof of it, I am come that ye might have life and that ye might have it more abundantly. Well, we don't have to keep that word life in there. We could say, I am come that ye might have business and that ye might have business more abundantly. I am come that ye might have ideas and that ye might have ideas more abundantly. I am come that ye might have help and that ye might have help more abundantly. Why? Because abundantly means fulfillment. It means completeness. It means an overflowing. And so I am come, God, the divine consciousness, the silent partner, the infinite invisible, has come that your activity might be fulfilled. Is that clear? No? Will you please talk about soul, divine consciousness, principle? Why, there is no way to talk about those things because they are facets, phases of God. God appears as our individual soul. God is our individual soul. God is our divine consciousness. God is principle or law. And so when we say soul, or say divine consciousness, or say principle, we are merely saying God in one of God's many aspects. Now then, the words can be used interchangeably, or they can mean whatever we would like them to mean. For instance, the word soul is very much connected with a person's integrity or morality or purity of thought. And so we might say then that we have no purity, we have no morality, and we have no integrity. God alone is good. God being the soul of our being, God is the integrity, the loyalty, the fidelity, the morality, the integrity of our being, and we have none of our own. In the same way, principle or law. We have no principle or law. We can't have. God is principle. God is law. God is the lawgiver. And therefore we can know God as the law of our being. God is the principle of our being. Then are we principled? Have we principles? Only insofar as we let God flow. Now, divine consciousness means all consciousness or spiritual consciousness, and that is that particular part of our being which gives us spiritual discernment. In our human consciousness, we know a lot of things that are common sense. But in our spiritual consciousness, we know things which are beyond common sense. In other words, it may be common sense to save our money, but that won't help us much if currency is wiped out, as we have seen it wiped out in Germany, nearly wiped out in France, and very low in England. What good then would our common sense be in saving our money if after all it was wiped out? Would that mean then that we were not going to have supply? No, because with our divine consciousness we would know the omnipresence of all good, and money would have no meaning. What good would money be to a man lost in the desert? What good would money be to a Rickenbacker out on the ocean in a rubber boat? Common sense would say they must perish. Oh, no. Divine consciousness says the place where thou standest is holy ground. And then what happens? Ravens come bringing food. Cakes are baked on the stones. Fish jump out of the water into the boat. Rain comes down out of a cloudless sky. All of that happens through what? Divine consciousness. Because an individual has caught a glimpse of that which cannot be seen. He has heard that which cannot be heard. He knows that which is unknowable. And that is divine consciousness. Divine consciousness is responsible for our being here, because all the things we've said, heaven forbid that a newspaper should publish them. See how we, in this entire week, have violated common sense, how we have violated everything that the natural man knows. And what is the result? Has it been insanity? No, because out of it we have had some restored health. We have had restored peace of mind. We have had comfort. We have had evidences of safety, of security, of increased supply. All the things that the world desires, but for which the world seeks through common sense. Oh, they would know how to get it with a gun. They would know how to get it with force, with might, with power. And we understand how to get it without might, without force, without power, but by my Spirit. Well, there we go back to that first question again of language. We say that we find our help and supply by the Spirit. Now imagine how much sense that would make to a man on the street. By the Spirit. He wouldn't even know if there is a Spirit, or if there is, what it would amount to. And so our language would be foolishness to him. And that is how it is that Scripture was always thought to be foolishness for the man in the street, and sometimes dangerous. I was just thinking of an illustration where sometimes it can be a little bit dangerous. There was a man lecturing in metaphysics a few years ago who said that because God is too pure to behold iniquity, you can do all the sinning you like and God won't know anything about it. That was a little dangerous for him. And a woman told me some years ago that it was my Christian Science background that made me fearful of alcohol. She wasn't afraid of it. And she passed on an alcoholic. A little knowledge was dangerous for her. You see, sometimes these great truths, yes, that happened to me in Boston one time. I was reported to the board of directors. A man came to me with a claim that hadn't been met. He'd been to several practitioners, but he knew why it couldn't be met. He was single, but he was human, so he had a sweetheart. And as long as that was true, he knew he was sinning and he couldn't be healed. And I said, oh, I don't think that that's going to prevent your healing. I don't think that sin has any power. So he went right over and told the directors that I said that you could sin all you want. Well, a little knowledge sometimes is very dangerous. And probably that is what our old mystics were afraid of, that the public would get that idea. You remember, Jesus brought out, too, that going through the fields wasn't theft and taking food. Without just supposing well, now, you see what happens? I could say to you, and I do say it in all seriousness, stealing is not a crime. It is really not dishonest at all. There's nothing wrong about it. Why? The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And if you understand that, then you can take anything of mine that I have, because you are leaving yourself in a position that someone can come along and take all that you have too. Now, if you really and truly have that consciousness, then you can say there is nothing wrong with what the world calls theft. But heavens, it wouldn't do good to go outside and talk about that. Yet Jesus did. He excused these people who went through fields. Out in California, it's a $50 fine to take an orange from a grove. Well, you know what Jesus would have done? He would have taken a whole basket full. You know that Jesus violated the Lord's Sabbath, too. And yet, if we were to say publicly, oh, we don't have Sabbath. You can violate Sabbath all you like. They'd probably talk about us the same as they did about him. And yet you know that there is no such thing as violating Sabbath. When you think of it as a certain day of the week, the only violation is a violation of your spiritual integrity. And you have to maintain that not on one day a week, on 7. So, probably there is a little danger sometimes in speaking of these things in plain English where we understand their inner or esoteric meaning. Well, the time has come for us to have some meditation. Has something about it that no other class ever has and no other class in the future ever can have. This class begins an entirely different unfoldment in healing work, and for those who can follow it up, in living, in spiritual living. We will start with healing work. Heretofore, those who have had any metaphysical experience in healing work have always denied the claim when it was presented, in one way or another. I have said, I am ill and need help, and then you have said, it isn't true, and it isn't real, and it isn't a part of God's creation, and so forth and so on. And we are ending that type of practice here and now. In the infinite way came the original unfoldment to me of the fact that God is. God is, and the infinite nature of God makes everything else an impossibility. All that is, God made. First chapter of Genesis is literally true. All that is, God made. And so to say it isn't true, or it didn't happen, or it can't happen in divine mind, or it's no part of God, would be to set up some creation that God did not make and We are denying it. Now the point is, God made all that was made. And all that God made is good. And so there's no such thing or thought as an evil. In following this through, then, suppose that we are faced with an appearance of discord. Since it is true still that God made all that was made, and all that God made is good, the point is that we are not to deny it, but affirm it. We are to agree with our adversary. We are to agree that anything that comes to us in the guise of evil cannot be evil, must be some form of good. It makes no difference what your sense of it is. It makes no difference what your concept of it is. In the medical world, a germ, certain germs, are infectious and contagious. We don't accept that concept at all, and we prove it. In medical practice, fevers can be very, very dangerous. We don't accept that concept, and we prove it. Now then, instead of denying, let us affirm. To illustrate, I say to you, I am ill. And instead of your setting up a resistance against that and denying it and fighting it and battling it, I ask you to agree that God is, and only God is. Nothing but God is. And therefore, stop denying, but rather agree. Agree at once. Otherwise, you've got something to overcome, something to get rid of, something to rise above. And if you work that way, you will find yourself right in the midst of a wonderful battle. You may win out in time, but the chances are against you. You can heal easily, beautifully, wonderfully, the moment you stop denying. If I have an appearance of error, look right at it and say, God is. If you want to leave out the word God, just say is, meaning something is there. How can you deny what you're seeing? There is something there, or you wouldn't be seeing something. And if there is something there, it's of God, or it wouldn't be there. So while at the moment you may be seeing it erroneously, finitely, the world may also, the human mind, actually in your innermost being, in your deep down in your spiritual being, you know right well there can't be evil. You know there can't be God and evil in any form. Then why not be brave enough to make that declaration? Whatever is, is. Whatever is of God. Now, for our purposes of healing, you do not know what it is you're looking at. Let's say I have a lump, and you're looking at it. There's no use saying the lump is of God, but you can say it is. You know it is because you're looking at it. You can see it. If you come close enough, you can feel it. So why deny it? It is, and you know it is. All right? Acknowledge then that it is. Then turn within and let the Father define to you what it is. You withhold labels. You do not call it good or evil. You just call it is, even if I don't know what it is or why it is. And as you turn within and acknowledge, yes, it is, Father, it is. It is. What is? Gradually to you will come a feeling of release, a feeling of all is well, or I am on the field, and pretty soon I will say to you, I'm healed. The evidence that we thought discordant isn't visible anymore. It is like looking at this wall and finding the picture blurred, and then saying to yourself, no, I know an artist did that. There can't be a blur there. But there is something there. I can't deny there's something there. It is. There is something there. Now, Father, what? And then you close your eyes, and when you open it, you see the picture without the blur. And you know the blur never was there. And you arrived at that by acknowledging there was something there, even though you didn't know what. And then you let the Father define to you what. And then harmony appears. You can this very night sit in your home and turn to any person requiring your help. And instead of denying, turn and say, Father, it is. It is. God is. I am. It is. Why should I ever deny anything when I know God to be the cause, the law, the substance, the reality of all that really is? Why should I deny it? Now I know it really is. It is. And I thank thee, Father, that it is. And then in silence, listen, and pretty soon you will find, if not the first time you try it, the second or third or fourth, don't be in a hurry, don't be impatient. But it will happen that as you practice from the standpoint of it is, you will find it is. And you will find it is good. Now, I can tell you the story of this. In my earliest days, I did healing work long before I knew anything about Christian Science or what Christian Science taught. But I didn't know how the healings were accomplished, or what, or why. I only knew that if I closed my eyes and waited a few moments, a feeling came within me, like a deep breath. I call it a click. And the person was healed. Now, I didn't know how and I didn't know why. I didn't affirm anything and I didn't deny anything. I knew nothing about affirming. I knew nothing about denying. I only knew that if I sat there quietly, something took place and a healing in the outer took place. Then, after I came to Christian Science and the practice, I found different theories of healing, mental theories and spiritual theories. But for myself, the healing work continued on that basis. However, it was one of the few things that I couldn't teach or explain. All I knew was that that happened with me. Now, in the years that have gone by, I have found that by teaching, as it is written in the writings, that many of our students automatically come to a state of consciousness like that, wherein they do not have to use mental argument, they do not deny, they do not affirm. They merely sit in a peaceful state, and then they're flooded in some way with that feeling of the Spirit. It differs with many. With some, it's a great feeling of warmth that goes throughout their body. With some, it is a deep sense of God's presence. With others, it is just that deep breath. But it comes to them, and they do some good healing work. But the explanation of it only came last summer. I was sitting with a student in the restaurant having breakfast, and in this work you'll find pretty soon you have to be at work before breakfast and at breakfast, trying to explain something of this healing work to him. And I could feel that I was not getting the idea across. And sitting on the table was a glass jug of syrup, maple syrup. And all of a sudden, I said to him, "What is this?" And he said, "Syrup." "Syrup?" "Yes." "It is syrup?" "Yes." "Well, how about a treatment and make it syrup?" "No, can't do that. It is syrup." "Well, how about a little prayer to make it syrup?" "No, it is syrup." "There's nothing you can do about making it syrup?" "No, it is syrup." "Well, could you do something about preventing it being syrup?" "No, it is syrup." "Well," I said, "that's the secret. It is. That's the whole secret of all this work. It is. God is. But God is infinite, so God is all there is. And there's nothing you can do about it. No use denying, no use affirming, no use of believing that your treatment will make it so, or that your prayers will make it so. In spiritual wisdom, all you can do is come into the awareness that God is, harmony is, all is, perfection is, infinity is. Now then, supposing that you do not know that this is syrup. Now we have a different question. Here we have something and you do not know the nature of it. You don't know whether it's good or evil. So you cannot say it is syrup. You cannot say it is good, it is spiritual, it is harmony. There's only one thing you can say about this, and you can say it is. That's all you know. There is something here in this jug. What it is, you don't know, but you know it is, you know it exists. Here it is. Now that you know that it is, but do not know the nature of it, turn to the Father within. And watch how quickly the Father will nod and say it's good. It has to be so because it can't be evil, can it? No. And when you have that inner assurance that it is good, nobody out here will be asking you for help anymore. I mean, that individual who asks you, oh yes, the moment that individual will get healed, 4 more are going to bob up that heard about that healing, and they are going to tell you of their illness, and as soon as those 4 are healed, there'll be 16 behind them. And that will go on forever as long as you keep ising. Now, it is not given to you or to me to state that we know what a cancer is, or consumption, or polio, or typhoid fever, or hydrophobia, or a venomous snake, or a wild beast. Now let us agree that we do not know what a snake is, that we do not know what a man-eating shark is. Let us admit that. We don't know spiritually what it is. There's only one thing of which we are sure, and that is that it is. Whatever its name or nature may be, it is. There is an is there. Something exists. That we know. Now let us face this is, this existent being thing, with that understanding. It is, I know not what, it is. Now let us get very quiet until an inner assurance comes that, thank you, Father. And then watch for tomorrow's report and see how much better it will be. And so on until we have complete and perfect, what we will call healing. Now remember this. Again, don't expect to write this down and go out and show it to your family and have them do anything but lock you up. Don't expect them to accept it. They haven't been with me since August, since this has been in work. And you have been, or you wouldn't be in this room. Now, from the moment this began, I said to this man, please don't tell this to anyone. Put it into practice. And let us see what happens. And he began to have some very interesting experiences. And so I told it to another of our students, and gradually I told it to about 12 down there in Hawaii. I couldn't tell it to anyone over here because I know how it would sound on paper. But the 12 that I told it to down there have found astonishing results, not only in healing work, but in their lives, because now we carry it to a further extent than merely healing. Healing, remember, is only a byproduct of spiritual living. It isn't the whole of spiritual living. The whole of spiritual living involves our relationship with each other and then our relationship with the world outside. And so we learned this, that instead of being good psychologists and looking at each other and saying, you know, I think you're honest, I think you're good, oh, but I think you're mean, I think you're bad, we stopped valuing, evaluating, putting labels on people, and we began with is. We know that you exist. What you are, how you are, we know nothing about it except we know you exist. And so whether we're looking at a human being or our man-eating shark or our reptiles, we start with the fact of existence. Is. And then let the Spirit define that which is. And pretty soon you'll find that none of us have the capacity to be other than God being to each other. And pretty soon you'll find that those around you outside, for the most part, have no capacity to be other than God being. Oh yes, you always will find some hard-boiled sinner that this will not work with. He's not yet ready to be awakened. But for the most part, you will find increased harmonious relationship with all in your world. To the businessman, that goes for buyers and salesmen and bosses and employees. Is them. And watch the magical results that take place in your experience as you learn to withdraw labels. Now this activity is called withdrawing labels. Do not label anyone good or bad. Do not label anyone sick or well, rich or poor, moral or immoral. Look at them and say is. Is. I see you. I know you're here. I know you is. And then turn within and see how wonderfully the Father defines us to each other as children of God. And pretty soon you'll find that we'll be like Peter. We'll be saying, thou art the Christ, the very Son of God. Because we will be looking through appearances to the Son of God, which is our true identity, yours and mine, and all these people outside who are not yet awakened to it. Some we will awaken it in them. Others we will arouse it enough for them at least to manifest more of it than they are doing. The only danger about this is that it reduces treatment to one word. It wipes out all that 7 steps of a treatment and 5 steps of a treatment and affirming and denying and then protecting. It reduces a treatment to one word. And so we can give our treatments now. In the old days, we had 2-finger treatments and 3-finger treatments, depending on how many fingers you put up to your forehead. And we had 10-minute treatments and 20-minute treatments and 30-minute treatments. And now treatment becomes one word. Is, without a label. I don't know what is or how much is or why is. I only know is. Harmony is. You see, it changes this picture. Supposing a man were walking along the street and we saw him steal a wallet, and we'd say, you are spiritual, you are Christ. Wouldn't that insult our intelligence? And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to look at automobiles cracking up and say, there are no accidents in divine mind. Doesn't that hurt your own feelings? It doesn't add up, it doesn't make sense, and it isn't a spiritual treatment. But if you can look at all that and say, something is occurring, there is an activity here, there is being here. Now, Father, what? Then you will see that spiritual sense will reveal the Christ restoring that stolen wallet and restoring the effects of the accident to normalcy. Only that can do that. Only that ability to stop denying and stop affirming, but recognize. Recognition is the word. Recognize without a label. Just recognize. And so you begin to look at, well, I tell you, at first you begin to look at the headlines that way, and then after a while you save a nickel a day. You don't need any newspapers because you know it is anyhow. Days, weeks go by, and you don't see any more Newsweeks or Time magazines. Or what's the use? You already know it is. And their evidence is not going to throw you off the path after you have experienced the first healing experience. From the time you have proved this once, you lose all interest in what the world calls news. Because you know that so far as is concerned, harmony is and is forever going to be, and to those who don't know it, the shift in the daily news is of very little importance. Now then, I have watched this idea of not affirming and denying in my own experience for, I think this is my 24th year in the practice. I have watched it with others who have been able to catch this glimpse from me. But since August, I have watched it with those who have consciously used the word is and maintained a state of is within their own being. You see, it changes within a week. Your whole interior life will have changed. Within 1 week, you will not be the same person if you begin consciously and conscientiously to use is with every appearance that comes before you. You see, every second of every day, 60 seconds to the minute, 60 minutes to the hour, you are being faced with appearances, and you are accepting them as either good or evil. Now, if you can consciously withhold that label of good or evil and declare only for the is, very soon an inner faculty will begin to work, revealing to you the is as it is. Then when we awaken, we will see him as he is, and we will be satisfied with that likeness. There's only one way. Let me withdraw my labels from you, and it is impossible for you to maintain very much animosity toward me. As a matter of fact, I learned this. I've had no public experience as a speaker or anything of that kind, And I had a very strange experience when I was first reader, because it began when I was first reader in the prisons here in New York City, when at first I was told to protect myself from sin-filled thought, and did it with a great deal of disaster. And then learned that that is not the way to stand before any congregation. The way to stand before them is in recognition of their Christhood. And the moment that I realized that, our attendance in that prison at the Christian Science services rose from an average of 8 to 11 to an average of 77. And all that took place within a 6-week period. Just the difference between looking out there at sin-filled thought and looking out there and beholding the Christ, beholding the beholding that which really is. Well, that same thing followed me then as first reader, because I saw that there were no such thing as people out here who are not class taught, and those who were class taught, and those who were practitioners and those who weren't, that all I had to do with out there was the Christ. As long as I read to the Christ, I was on safe ground. The minute I would, well, of course I didn't. My prison experience taught me never to read down to anyone, and certainly not to look up to anyone. And it worked, didn't it, Laura? You saw it out there for 3 years. Yes, it worked. We had a full church, always full, only in one way, by beholding Christ. Beholding is, never judging. Oh, yes, we had a lady, every church has them, who gets up every Wednesday night and tells about a claim of a belief, of a temptation of a something or other, and talks until you have to ask her to please sit down, that others are waiting. We had those little things come up here or there, but it wasn't up to the reader to put a label. It was up to the reader to stand by in that is, and then watch how harmony prevailed all the way through. Now then, we're not all going to be prison readers, and we're not all going to be first or second readers in a church. If we stick to the infinite way, we'll never be a reader or a practitioner or a teacher, but we'll always be practicing and teaching. But we will only do it in proportion as we develop the ability not to sit in judgment on appearances, not to be too hasty to welcome the good appearances, not to be too hasty to discard the evil appearances, but to welcome them all as is and let that realization take over. Then I'm sure you will find that anything or anybody or any activity of an undesirable nature will gradually fall away. And we will be left with mostly harmonious experiences. Now that does not mean, and please, I'm going on record right here, that does not mean that we will not have some disagreeable experiences in our lives. So far, I have not yet found that I have entered the promised land of all milk and honey. It's a beautiful life, and I wouldn't see many ways of improving it, but once in a while some discord bobs up in one form or another. But I realized then that it's a call to go higher in this realization of God as individual being. Supposing you were to agree with the Honolulu closed class that God is individual being, how could you ever say anything except is? How could you ever talk about good health or bad health, good wealth or bad health, after acknowledging that God is individual being? Well, you see, this unfoldment comes right along from that basis. If God is individual being, what difference, what appearance I am seeing in you? God is individual being. If anyone doubts that, they will have to move out of this aura of the infinite way and come to truth through some other approach, because that is our basis. God is individual being. God is the life, the mind, the soul, the spirit, and even the substance of body. God is. God is the allness of individual beings, yours and mine. So supposing there is an evidence to the contrary, has it anything to do with your being or with an erroneous concept of your being? Now, study that word concept, appearance, temptation, suggestion. Those are our 4 words. Study those words. A concept is a mental image. So if I have a wrong opinion of you, a wrong concept of you, it means I have a wrong mental image of you. Now, has that anything to do with you? No, you are what you are. That's what I said about Shakespeare's mistake. Supposing, for some reason, you form an erroneous opinion of me, an evil one, what will that have to do with me? I will still be what I am, and there's no use of asking someone to give me a treatment. Oh, it has been done. Yes. Some of my friends have gone to others and said, won't you please give Joel a treatment? I know he's on the wrong path. Now then, there is no use of judging by your concept of me as to what I am. But if you would like to know what I am, just declare that I am, and then go within and let God tell you what I am, and who I am, and why I am, and you'll get all the answers. Don't judge by appearances. Don't judge by height or weight. Don't judge by anything that you have heard about me or anything that you even think about me. Go within and just say is. Say he is, I am, and he is. But who is he? What is he? Why is he? And then go in and let God give you the answer. Don't take it from man. Don't take it from concepts. Don't take it from beliefs. Don't take it from suggestions. Take it from what God reveals to you. Now, the same way, you have someone at home who is ill, or who is sinning in some form, or lacking in some form, and you have accepted that suggestion about them. You have been tempted into accepting that appearance as if it were really were so. Now go home and start all over. Clear out all of those concepts and beliefs until you get stripped down to one fact. He or she is. That I know. He or she is. That I know. And that's all I know. No labels now. I don't know what, I don't know when, I don't know how old or how young. I don't know why. I merely know he is. She is. Now, Father, it's up to you. And then you go within and listen, and very soon you'll find out what he is or she is, and who and why, and it will be harmonious, because the only is there is God. You see how is fits in with Moses and Jesus' revelation? I am. What's the difference between I am or I is? He is. He am. Doesn't make any difference. It's just a matter of dictionary language. Just a play on words, whether I am or he is. That's all it is. The fact remains in whether we say I am or you is or you are or he is. The fact remains of isness, isn't it? Isn't that the only fact that there is, whether we say it through am or is or are? The fact is isness, being. The fact is being. And what is the only being? God's the only being. See how true it is? You can even prove it humanly. Wait till you see how you prove it spiritually. Wait till you see how you prove it when you're done. The only one thing I would like to ask, don't tell this to anyone and don't teach it to anyone. Not your nearest or dearest. Not to anyone. Until at least 6 months have gone by. Keep it a secret within your own being until at least 6 months have gone by. For the simple reason that the things we talk about, we just spill out in the air, and we let every human thought come along and take it away from us. We're just cheated of these things that we tell in advance. Now, you know, it's, well, the old story. You might think up a good story and tell somebody, and the next day or week read it in a book. And one man, after reading The Infinite Way, turned to his wife and he said, he plagiarized that. He took it from me if I had written a book.